Well, good evening, and welcome to another presentation from the How We Eat Diet. This is Paul Malcolm, president of How We Eat Diet, and it's sure a privilege to be with you here again. And it's hard to believe it's already toward the middle or end of October. Where is this year gone? But we've got another great program here with you today, and then we have Dr. Starkey, who's going to be talking about trace minerals. And before we get into that, though, let's just open up in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to share this information. And we know Dr. Starkey has some great insights and information to share, and we pray that we'll be able to garner the information and apply it to our lives, that each of us can improve our health through what we're learning tonight. We pray that you'll just bless the technology and bless the information and bless Dr. Starkey. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, Dr. Darrin Starkey is a board-certified naturopathic physician who has worked for Trace Minerals Research since 1991. We were just talking a few minutes ago about, between the two of us, we have like 55 years of experience in the natural health industry and how much it's changed over those times. But Dr. Starkey focuses his training and education on the building blocks of a healthy diet and the role trace minerals play in our health. Dr. Starkey, it's a real privilege to have you with us. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hey, Paul, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, sir, and we sure appreciate the role that Trace Minerals has, and I guess you can just take away the presentation.
Super, thank you, and please, especially with your knowledge, Paul, I would love for your insight tonight as we go through this information. If there's something that you would like to convey or to add, please do so. But I think ultimately.
And likewise, if any of the guests on the line would like to ask questions, feel free to put questions in, and we'll get to them as we can through the presentation. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Dr. Starkey.
No. That's great. So the first question that was asked is where am I? And I don't know if that's where you are, Paul, or where I'm at, but I'm actually in Virginia is where I'm with my family. I have 4 children, and they've like you said earlier, Paul, where does time go? I've watched my children grow, and I've got one left at home, and I'm trying to hold on to time as much as I can, but it seems to be catching up, and that's why I take as many daily basis, and we'll get to that. But ultimately here, what I would love to do is I just want to put the basics, what these traits and why they're so important and what they do for us and why we need them every day. But I think that anybody that's ever opened up a chemistry book has looked at a periodic table. And I think sometimes, Paul, and probably to a lot of our listeners, we forget it as fast as we looked at it because it's something that we don't, use in our daily lives. But these trace minerals are so essential for our human body. And because they're referenced as trace, that's exactly what they are. They are literally tiny amounts of elements that are absolutely essential to our health. Some of the most important, as far as the minerals themselves, these trace minerals are in an ionic form. And the reason why I want to bring that up is that by nature, a plant would take an element from the soil and of course, utilize it and break it down. But one of the things that the ionic trace minerals do is defined from an ion standpoint as an atom or a group of atoms, either a positive or negative charge, meaning that they conduct electrical impulse within the body. And this, of course, keeps our organs, such as our brain and our hearts, functioning every day. But what we sometimes fail to remember is that, again, plants require these minerals in their ionic form, and they, of course, are absorbed through the soil. These minerals, of course, enter through the root system of the plant from the surrounding soil. Within that, of course, if the mineral attempts to enter into the root system that's not in its ionic form, of course, it will run it through this process, which, of course, the plant puts the element through the exterior of the root that breaks it down into its smallest form, and, of course, that smallest form is an ion. Now, oftentimes, as far as how do we get these ionic trace minerals into our body, and this is where it gets a little interesting to me, is that this particular doctor, and I love this guy because, again, I think he puts it in a text so that we could all understand that soil is the basis of all human life and our only hope for a healthy world. All of life will either be healthy or unhealthy according to the fertility of the soil. Minerals in the soil control the metabolism of the cells in the plants, animals, and, of course, in us. Now, that information, by the way, that was back in, 1912 when that statement was made. And that doctor, by the way, is Alexis Carrel, was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and I think he was beyond his time, but I think when we come back to the soil, we have to identify what the soil is made of. And I don't think we think about this often. We think about the fruits and vegetables coming from the soil, but let's think about this for just 1 minute. The soil that we have should be made up, of course, of water, air, pieces of rock. Some would call that humus, which, of course, is a mixture of decomposed plants and animals. And yet that top layer, and I find this extremely fascinating because, again, I think sometimes we take topsoil for granted, but that top layer, of course, is called topsoil. It's the most fertile because of the humus, and it takes 850 years to form 2 centimeters of soil, of topsoil. So this is a layer that we grow our plants in. It's all, of course, it has many properties, including mineral compositions, which can vary depending on where the soil is formed. Yet, Dr. Carrel's statement, think about what's happened since that statement, by the way, to our soils, or to us as a society, I should say. We've industrialized, we've commercialized, we've pasteurized, and we sanitize basically everything we eat and drink today. Now, I know that that's probably, again, for those listeners with us tonight, I wouldn't put you in that category. But for the common consumer, for the common individual out there, this is what's taken place in their lives since that statement was made by Dr. Carrel. So why are trace minerals so necessary? And again, we could go on for hours on this topic, but in 1936, there was a gastroenterologist by the name of Dr. Charles Northern. 99% of the American population was deficient in these trace minerals due to agricultural farming techniques. Now, Dr. Northern went on to state that no matter how delicate these deficiencies were within our bodies, that it would sicken, suffer, and shorten our lives. Now, here's what is concerning to me, Paul, and please forgive me but if we were that deficient in 1936, if that information is true, where do you think we are today as a society when it comes to soil deficiency?
Well, certainly we're extremely deficient, and I don't think we'd see as much sickness as we're experiencing today if people had the trace minerals and the nutrients in the soil that they need.
And, with that being said, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight because I don't think it would be necessary. If we had it, if we lived in a perfect world with perfect soil, right? But so let's think about this for a minute. So if the trace minerals aren't in our soil, they won't be found in our food. If they're not in our food, then of course they're not in our bodies. And if they're not in our bodies, we call that deficiency today, right? And if we don't resolve that deficiency, that is called dysfunction or dis-ease in our society today. And it can really be that basic, is that one of these trace minerals out of balance can cause such a catastrophic condition. So how are we designed to feed ourselves? Now, again, I do this. This is just a basic, but if you don't believe me, we were designed to pick it, pluck it, dig it, fish it, and I know that one's a hard one, kill it if you were extremely fortunate, and to drink water. Agree or disagree, Paul?
I think that's the way it lays out.
Right? Yet today, and by no means, here's where we're at today. So in other words, we should be eating a raw fruit, vegetable, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes, and a small portion of protein. And of course, we know we can get some of that protein from other sources as well. And we also, of course, have to have the water. Nothing replaces that water. And yet today, and please forgive me, it seems as though we cook it, typically overcook things, nuke it, eat it out of a can, a box, a pickup window, a concession stand, or a vending machine. And of course, we drink no water because there's just way too many options. Now, I know that many of us have family members that have that type of lifestyle, that we can talk until we're blue in the face, but until they come into a crisis, they go down that road of quick, fast, and easy. But then it brings me to the next topic that I'm a huge advocate of, and again, feel free to throw some questions at us, but were we designed to live on bottled, filtered, distilled, or RO water? And when we really stop to think about it, I think we can come to a resounding no. Because ultimately, we were designed to live on groundwater, spring water, creek water, and river water. Now, Paul, I don't mean to call you out, but have you been to your local creek or river lately?
I have not.
And when the last time that you were there, did you have a desire to pull out a cup and dip it and say to yourself, "There's my minerals for the day"?
I did not.
Probably not, right? I mean, we are scared to death of our environments in the fact that we really, again, there's a lot of consumers, there's a lot of Americans, I should say, that are afraid of drinking out of their own tap water, right? But with this water, and of course, what makes it up, I think about some of the issues at hand, that when we stop drinking water and when we start looking at our anatomy and how we're designed, we have to think a couple of things up front. And that, of course, is water makes up 90% of our blood, 85% of our brain, 75% of our tissue, and 30% of our skeletal. So in other words, we should not, nothing replaces water. And yet at the same time, we lose about 2.5 to 3 cups of body fluid each day just by living and breathing, okay? As we lose this fluid, we also lose these trace minerals every single day. Now, Paul, again, I apologize. Paul, when's the last time you quit breathing since you left your mother's womb?
Well, I think that would be a difficult thing to answer, because I don't think that would happen.
Right? That has never happened. And yet at the same time, I want to bring this to light for just a minute. So each day, through respiration, perspiration, urination, and defecation, and of course in women, during that time of their life, menstruation. There's a lot of Asians right there. But remember, every single day, we are constantly losing these trace minerals. I think that, again, that's just the basic, that's how our body cannot, of course, our bodies can't synthesize a mineral, but we have to put them back into our bodies on a daily basis. Because if we're not putting them back on a daily basis, if our output of these trace minerals is greater than our input, our bodies literally have to rob our cells, our tissues, our organs, and eventually our bone just to maintain the homeostasis of the blood. So if our output is greater than our input and we don't know as a society how to put them back in, or that we're not asking the right questions, I think that we can run ourselves into a lot of health challenges, and this is how it works, is that these trace minerals work synergistically with, with one another to ensure the proper absorption, activation, regulation, and pH balance within our bodies. That's how important they are. And yet, I would say that, again, we run into a lot of challenges today because of the fact that, we assume, and I think that this is where, Paul, we sometimes get stuck between the micro and the macro, because oftentimes we assume that all the trace minerals we need are in our multivitamin. And yet, by the way, that is the number one selling supplement and in the nation, and has been for decades, is multivitamins. And yet I would challenge our listeners tonight that if you're looking and studying on trace minerals, that you look at your multivitamin that you're taking and find out how many trace minerals are in that multivitamin. And chances are you might get to 12. 12 trace minerals is probably what you'll reach. But what's amazing about these trace minerals in the Hallelujah diet is it's a full spectrum trace mineral supplement that we believe that all 90 exist, but science, as of yet, can only identify 78. And yet, at the same time, by putting that in conjunction with and remember, we are not here to change supplementation. We're not here to change diets. We're here just supplementing the foundational aspect of our health that oftentimes is overlooked. And Paul, in your 25 years, how many times do we have to talk and educate on the importance of trace minerals on a daily basis? Paul, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
So when you're talking about trace minerals, do you think there's a difference between the trace minerals that come through the produce that's grown in the soil, as opposed to the minerals that are found in the rivers and in the streams and so forth, and that the ones through the food are better assimilated by the body, where the ones through the river and the stream the body has a hard time of assimilating?
Well, that's an interesting question, because oftentimes, and can I address that from a couple of aspects?
Sure. And I think, I think as we're looking at it, is it organic or inorganic? If we're looking at it coming in from a stream, you're looking at more of an inorganic type of mineral rather than an organic mineral, not to be confused with organic produce.
Correct. So the very definition of organic is an element linked to a carbon molecule, and that's what the plant does. Oftentimes when we see these different, of course, matrix in plants, there'll always be a carbon molecule, and that's that form in which is considered organic. Yeah, that's a great point, by the way. Organic food. To me, organic food today is the cleanest food available. No pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, or fungicides. But I still believe that we have a long ways to go from a fertile soil standpoint to get that full spectrum and balance. And that's why I believe that keep doing what we're doing. Keep eating the fruits and vegetables that are available, that we have available to us. But that's why supplementing with this, with the mineral product is so invaluable, because, again, oftentimes we don't know today let me rephrase that. We should know where our foods are being grown. And ultimately, we would love to grow them ourselves, but for many consumers today, that's not possible. And especially for single-parented families, that's one of my greatest passions, is helping them understand why it's so important that they put these trace minerals back into their health, as well as their supplementation to their children's health, because oftentimes time and money is so valuable.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, and I guess, we've had a couple of questions relating to that as well, being the minerals coming from a stream, and especially with how polluted our waters are today. I know in one of the slides it indicated, we should be drinking it from the streams and not from purification systems. But wouldn't you agree that it'd be better to have a pure water and then putting trace minerals back in than rather to have polluted water?
Absolutely. I'm so sorry. Absolutely, Paul. In fact, so those slides, that would be in the perfect scenario here as far as where we should be drinking. But by all means, let's do we drink RO water or distilled water because we know it's contaminant-free, but it's also element-free. But that's why it's so important to put the trace minerals back into the water that we're most comfortable with and what we feel is, will protect us from all the other contaminants. So I absolutely 100% agree. That, I hope I didn't confuse. So ultimately, again, that's why we want to put these minerals back in, because so many of us are drinking completely element-free water. And with that being said, a lot of our foods, a lot of our diets, a lot of our choices do not have the amount of trace minerals that we should be getting on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with one point, there's a pH balance. These trace minerals play a huge role in our overall pH balance of our body, because, again, one pH does not fit all in the body. I know that we like to gravitate oftentimes to saliva and urine, but they can fluctuate so drastically with our diets or dehydration or, But what I'm referring to here is that these trace minerals help that balance throughout the entire body, because ultimately our blood has a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. And if it changes 1/100%, we're dead. And oftentimes we get consumers that say, then why aren't we all dead? And although that's a good question, that is one thing I have to say, is that our Maker has made us in a way that we are amazingly adaptable. We are designed to adapt. We're designed to, heal. We're designed to balance, and we just have to put the proper tooling in necessary. And what these trace minerals do is that they're the buffer system. It helps buffer. And of course, think about this for a minute. We have a pH in our body that, the most acidic liquid in the, secretion in the human body is found in our gut, which is our hydrochloric acid that has a pH of 1.2 to 3. Yet many of us never ask the question, where's the most alkaline solution in the human body? And we remove this little tiny organ in our society like it was placed there by accident. I think we all understand that we were not made accidentally, right? But that would be found in the gallbladder. The bile in the gallbladder has a pH of 7.6 to 8.65. And yet, when you stop to look at the overall balance of the body, from 1.2 to 8.65, there are pHs throughout the entire system ranging from, all over the pH chart. But ultimately, the most important pH within the body is within the blood. Now, here's where it gets interesting, is that oftentimes it's very difficult, to range these different pHs, because if your blood, and I hope you never experience this, if your blood goes to 8.0, you are non-responsive. And yet, the worst place we can test for mineral deficiency is within the blood, because the body will do everything in its power to protect the blood and its balance. So ultimately, what I hope that we can do, and I hope that we can convey, by balancing these trace minerals on a daily basis, we can stop the robbing process from within the body, reestablish those storage bays, and of course, protect ourselves for when we truly need those storage bays, instead of overcoming hiccups in our health along the way. Because I believe, and again, Paul, this is just my personal opinion, I believe the most overlooked, undiagnosed health condition that robs us of our trace mineral balance every single day, and I think more so now than ever before, and we don't call it the silent killer in our society for nothing, and that would be emotional stress. If we find ourselves in a place where we have a tremendous amount of stress, and who doesn't today, I would say to you, what a wonderful opportunity to increase your trace mineral balance by increasing your usage. And ultimately, people ask the question all the time, what's the worst case side effect if I take too many of these trace minerals? And I'm going to say to you, without hesitation, a laxative response, meaning that your bowels will loosen. So I want to throw a question out at you again, Paul, if you don't mind. Have you ever had the privilege of eating too many ripened cherries?
Absolutely, I love it.
Okay.
And yes, I do get loose bowels because I can't stop eating them.
I was just going to say, did your parents as a child run you to the emergency room to have your stomach pumped?
I don't think they did that.
No, they didn't have to, right? You had to run yourself to the restroom because you knew that you had eaten too many cherries, right?
That's right.
Well, anybody that's ever had that wonderful experience of eating too many fruits or too many fruits typically, we don't run ourselves to the emergency room, but we do run ourselves to the restroom. And I think it's one of the best ways nature has protected us from ourselves is by having a good, bowel, flush when it comes to eating too many fruits or vegetables. It's just our body's way of knowing what it needs and what it doesn't need, and it releases what it doesn't need. And I think as a society today, we all need a good trace mineral bowel flush right now. I think we'd be kinder to one another. I think we'd think clear, and I know that we would be healthier in doing so. That's just my opinion.
It certainly makes sense.
For those that have never tried the minerals, I do want to say this. If you start too fast, of course, your body might give you some indicators that, again, you've taken too much. But one of the biggest questions we get is the taste. And I would have to say that I've addressed that taste factor. And I know this is an exaggeration, but it feels like I've addressed it 1 billion times in my career. But I like to bring it back to the fact that, that concept that we've always been taught, an apple a day that kept the doctor away. It's not what the apple tastes like. For most people that like eating apples, they do it right to the core, without skipping any of the fruit. But at the same time, it's not what the apple tastes like, it's what the apple offered. And I believe that that's applicable here, is that we should make this experience comfortable for ourselves. I know that many in our society have extremely sensitive taste buds, and oftentimes I think our taste buds are dictating our health choices. Excuse me. But if we start slow and then slowly work up, but I always ask the question, most consumers of supplements, they take everything at breakfast and they're done for the day. So I pose a question oftentimes is, does that mean that we quit breathing after breakfast and stressing after lunch? And the answer to that is no. That's when it begins. So, in other words, I love to space these trace minerals out throughout the entire day the way it was designed. It would be found within the water that we drink, the food that we should be consuming, and the very air that we should be breathing. So, in other words, we would breathe it all day long. We would, consume it multiple times throughout the day as we would eat, or of course as we hydrate. So in other words, break these minerals, the dosage up throughout the entire day and make it enjoyable for you throughout the entire day. Does that make sense, Paul? Do you have any questions, anything to add to that?
No, it does make sense. And, trying to get the trace minerals in and, spreading them out through the day, putting them in waters, and even into like barley max or other drinks, helps to get them in. And I guess one of the questions that I saw, which is always interesting, is there a particular food that you think would be higher in trace minerals that people can consume?
That is a fantastic question, and typically I would take you to the kelps and the dulses and the alfalfa. Oftentimes with a lot of our herbal formulations and what's available to us, if you're looking to supplement with an herb or food nutrients, those would probably be my 3 top picks. Alfalfa as a land plant, and of course dulse and kelp as the seaweeds.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Barley Max, but we blend barley and alfalfa, the juice of both of those. And what ended up happening, we wanted to put more alfalfa in, but when we increased the amount of alfalfa, it got so bitter that it became a really unpleasant drink. And so we had to balance back in the barley to keep it to where it was still palatable. Even people still feel it's not that palatable.
Well, that's the point right there, is that those are some wonderful choices, and I would love to, anything dealing with barley, alfalfa, blue-green microalgae, those type of, deep greens, you're going to find trace mineral and in them. And then the question comes up, why then the trace minerals? And again, it comes down to the fact that the concentration of those minerals, I don't see the fruits and vegetables and seaweed that would amount in a dose in a day's worth of eating. Does that make sense? So it comes
certainly.
down to
the foods produce that we're buying from the grocery stores are so void of the trace minerals that even though we're getting from a good source like a barley or alfalfa, we still can utilize the additional trace minerals just because the other foods are void of them.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So keep doing the barley maxes, keep doing those supplements, and then, of course, this is just a foundational piece. I guess I sometimes look to it this way. Does it really matter what we construct with or what we decorate with if our foundations are crumbling to begin with? And I bring that up because I love to look to the trace minerals, by drinking the proper, and I'm a huge proponent of half your body weight in ounces of water daily at a minimum. And then by adding the trace minerals to that water, that's the concrete to our foundations. And then as we feed the body those other nutrients throughout the day, I think there are so many things that we can get from the micronutrients and the fibers and of course, what God intended us to eat our fruits and vegetables for to begin with.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of touched on it earlier, and if somebody's drinking water from a well, the minerals from that are not going to be ionic because they haven't been through a plant cycle which would convert them into an ionic. So for the body to utilize any of the minerals from that, it would have to attach an enzyme to it from the body. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that, again, there of course, from an ionic standpoint, that, of course, they disassociate very easily in the body, and that's why they're so usable in the fact that they can identify that active transport system, as you mentioned, with that enzyme, reaching out and attaching and pulling that into the system. So, again, oftentimes with those inorganic, the body literally has to go through a digestive process with them in order to break them down so that the body can transfer them through that ion transport.
And it's not the most efficient system. Would you agree? You're probably assimilating about 30% of the minerals from
And, because of the digestive disorders that we face today as a society, Paul, I would say that, again, we have a hard enough time absorbing our fruits and vegetables, much less some of these forms. So I would say that, again, if you're not getting them in their proper balance and we're not putting them in that, yes, your body is probably struggling to utilize those minerals efficiently, and we're still finding ourselves deficient.
Right. Do you find that there's any difference in the quality of the trace minerals if somebody eats raw versus cooked vegetables, fruits and vegetables?
Are you saying using the minerals to cook with?
No. So if broccoli has X number of minerals in it, and, in its raw state, if you cook that, does it change the mineral composition?
Well, oftentimes we have to be careful because what we typically do is we'll leach those minerals out, and unless you drink the broth, the vegetable really has very little to offer from a mineral standpoint. So I think that as a society, we that's why I put in there, we typically overcook things, and unless we're drinking the broth, it's very difficult for us to get that balance within the fruits and the vegetables that we are cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an interesting one for you. Oftentimes we fail to remember that the largest organ of the body is our skin. And what I like to do with these ionic minerals is I like to put them on point specific. That concept seeing is believing?
Right.
It's awful nice when we see something and then we can believe it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, our skin has an amazing ability to absorb those ionic minerals without going through a digestive process, and you can see the results. What's it doing internally that we never get to see, but I hope we're paying attention to and relate it to our overall well-being? Because I think that oftentimes we start taking a supplement or we start making some changes, but we get discouraged quite quickly. Because here we are on October 20th, 2020, and like you said, where did this year go? At times, I don't know. It's kind of interesting how fast it's gone and at times how slow it's also felt, right? But how many Americans do you think right now, Paul, still are living their New Year's resolutions from the beginning of the year?
Well, I doubt there's very many at all.
So that was a very kind answer because I don't know probably none, right? But
I was going to say less than 2%.
Okay, and I was going to say that was a very kind answer. But here's my point. Oftentimes we get so busy in life and we get so, especially right now where we have a lot of time on our hands. So we have a lot of time to think. And I think that, what a wonderful opportunity to make take an opportunity to keep notes on our health, to start that, foundational approach again by reestablishing these minerals on a daily basis. And by doing so, if it means that you start topically, pick a spot on the skin that you're challenged with. It could be skin rash or abrasion or, a healing standpoint, and let me point this out really quick. You do not want to put it on straight onto an open wound. I just want you to be very clear about that. You want to dilute the minerals and then apply it. But when you start to see the results topically, I want to throw a thought out, can I? And I'm going to use the smallest number. Paul, when's the last time you looked at a human blood cell?
About 2 weeks ago.
Oh, great. So were you doing a live blood cell analysis?
I was participating in one, yes.
Okay. So did you see that cell with the human eye?
No.
They had to magnify it by at least 1,000, right?
That's correct.
And yet at the same time, do you realize there are more components inside that one human blood cell than there are stars in the galaxy that your eyes can see?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Right? Isn't that staggering? And yet I'm going to use the smallest number I know. They state that we have 37.2 trillion cells within our body. And some will say, of course, now the numbers have, some say, I'm just going to use the smallest number. Yet at the same time, we don't even understand today in science how that one cell functions, much less keeping it, in balance with another 37.2 trillion cells, right? Yet we're asked to feed them. And yet we don't, to me, the biggest key here is that we don't have to know everything. We don't have to know how that cell functions or operates. All we have to do is hydrate it and feed it. And it's been, a wonderful, and to me, again, the very foods that were designed for our bodies, as simple and as complex as they are, they're very easy to put, to get into us. Yet, at the same time, I've heard all my colleagues for years say, if it tastes good, spit it out. Chances are it's not good for you. And I would disagree with that. I think there's some amazing things that are completely nutritious, that are wonderfully tasting. But I would say to you, minerals are not one of them, okay? But when we put it in on a consistent daily basis and we pay attention to our overall well-being, I hope that they will come back and share with us what they've personally experienced from their own individual health, because I'm going to break it down this way. I'm not much into symphony music, but I love the concept of the fact that you can orchestrate the world's finest musician, assemble the world's finest musicians, and unless you put a conductor in front of them who doesn't play an instrument, but to keep them, on the same sheet of music, chances are they're going to sound quite rough if you don't put a conductor, right?
Right.
What I would say to this product is that this is like putting that conductor inside that wonderfully amazing machine that we call a human body. And if we do it consistently, that internal symphony, which I believe is the most amazing orchestrated symphony ever designed or created within each one of us, will play some masterful, amazing music that should take our breath away. But I think sometimes we get so focused on what or how we feel that we forget how we should feel, and we begin to look to normal as just waking up and having enough energy to make it out the door, and that's not how we're designed. I believe that we were designed to be Ferraris, every one of us, but we treat ourselves like push mowers daily. We push through the day. We hope tomorrow gets better. And when we keep pushing and tomorrow comes and goes and we still push each day, Einstein called that insanity. And I think that, I hate to say it, but I think we have a lot of insane individuals out there today that push themselves daily. But when we put that spark back into those cells, and that conductor, which these trace minerals do, is that they're the natural conductor, that they're the power grid. We put them back in, and we put those spark plugs back onto these amazing engines. We should be amazed as to how we feel each day. And to me, that's the challenge today, is are you pushing yourself as a push mower? Are you truly, are you feeling like a Ferrari?
I think that's a really great analogy, and I think so many people are just struggling through the days, and it's amazing when you feed your body with the nutrients that it needs, how the body can perform at such a much higher performance.
Absolutely. And with all the different struggles we have today, emotionally, mentally, and physically, I think the emotional aspect right now, Paul, I've never experienced in my 30 years the type of emotional stress globally like we have right now. And yet at the same time, I believe that this product is so incredibly simple to use, but so incredibly complex that science still don't understand it. We just have to put it in place, and I hope we're paying close attention, because ultimately we are our greatest physicians. We know us better than any physician out there other than our maker. We just have to pay attention to us.
It is amazing how intelligent the body is.
Isn't it?
And it is.
I think that that's one thing that we're not hearing from our specialists today, is that amazing thing we call the immune system. It's alive. It's a well in all of us. We just have to feed it and keep it healthy. And to me, like I said, we are amazingly adaptable. We can adapt very quickly. But let me throw this thought out. You know, these trace minerals, if taken 40 drops, have 250 milligrams of pure elemental magnesium. And I bring that up because, you know, it was stated, and you can correct me here, Paul, if you remember, I think about 5 years ago, our government actually came out and stated that 68% of our population was magnesium deficient. And I think we could probably flip that number even then and still be correct. But this element is the Tranquil Element. It is, during the daytime, it is the energy producer. At nighttime, it's the Tranquil Element. It helps the body calm itself down, and yet at the same time, I believe it's one of the key missing pieces to our amazing immune system right now that we have to keep fed. And at the same time, one of the greatest robbers of this, besides stress, in my opinion, is sugar. So oftentimes when we find ourselves extremely stressed and we start to eat things that we typically don't eat, which usually are loaded full of sugar, we're loading, and of course, other beverages of choice in our society right now that is on an increase. But those are some amazing robbers of this amazing element that if we're not focused on and helping educate our families on, or individuals within our families, or whatever friend, family, or foe, we're all brothers and sisters in this fight. We have to feed that body and keep that balance. And I believe that this is just a key piece to that overall well-being that we're just neglecting because we haven't been educated on it.
Yeah, certainly that's the case.
And like you said earlier, Paul, we can put these minerals into greens, we can put these into protein shakes, we can put them in smoothies, we can put them, we have some amazing nurturers out there. These nurturers have figured out a way to get it into their children and their grandchildren in ways that, I look at them and go, wow, that is amazing. But you can freeze them in ice cubes, make them fun for the kids. You can mix it in things to help our aging parents or grandparents get it in without them knowing. But that's the key. If they don't know they're getting it, you're delivering it perfectly the way it was designed by nature. That's perfection in a bottle.
Yeah. Our daughter has been putting trace minerals to her children, even when they were, just eating like soft cereals. And she would just, mix it in with the cereals. She'd mix that with the barley max as well, and pediatricians have just been amazed at how much better they are doing than their peers.
And Paul, we hear that all the time. I sometimes, especially when it has to be a physician telling them how good they're doing, that we finally realize we're doing something good. But that, to me, the key there is that by putting it in on a daily basis and seeing the response and being noticed, the noticeable responses, I hope and of course I know that she'll never change because of the fact she's witnessed the change within her children, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's a great point, by the way. I don't care if you're a day old or 105 years old. These minerals are applicable to all. And what I find interesting, Paul, is that not only have they discovered that they're good for their grandchildren, they're good for their fur pets, their fur children too.
Well, a lot of people take better care of their fur pets than they do themselves.
That is a true statement. That is a true statement. So I think that at this point, once we put that foundation in place, we are amazingly designed to function the way that we were designed to function, and we just have to put it back in and put hope. It brings an amazing amount of peace when we start feeling better about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly the case. And, you know, as you mentioned, we're under a lot of stress, both physically and emotionally these days, which puts just an incredible amount of stress on the nutrient makeup of the body. So it's more now than ever, it's important for us to make sure that we're getting the proper nutrition, including the trace minerals.
Absolutely. I've always said, how can we be a tool in the hands if we're unwell, right? We have an amazing tool here that I hope tonight will just give you a piece of the iceberg that we have available to our bodies just by one simple supplement that all ages can benefit from. Mm-hmm.
Certainly. And so we're running up on the hour. Just a few minutes left. We certainly appreciate all the information and insights you brought this evening. Any last words to share before we sign off for the evening?
Paul, the only thing I would say is today is a fantastic day to start. If you don't have a bottle of those minerals, I hope you'll order them tomorrow and start as quickly as you can, because we're going to need it.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. I think that's great advice. But thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time out of your evening to share this great information. And we pray that you're blessed through the presentation.
I already have been, and I will look forward to the future with you.
Well, sounds great. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's been a privilege to have you with us. And do check out the trace minerals that Dr. Starkey's been talking about. They do make a difference. And we pray that you'll stay in health even through this difficult time. Until next month, and we just pray that God's peace be with you. Good night.